people are like, oh, once a narcissist, always a narcissist. It's because when you're at those very, very low levels, like it's really hard to move through those
Hmm.
because a lot of people that have narcissistic tendencies or are narcissists are because they are, it's because they haven't had anyone show them another way.
Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today we're jumping into, I feel like this is just there's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of like, is that person really that way? Or am I just labeling them that way? But we're going to be jumping into the topic of narcissism, okay? Like, and how we sometimes throw around that word a lot, but what is it actually, right? Like, getting down to the depths of what a narcissistic person actually looks like and how come that happens. Because before we jumped on this call, Ashley and I were talking about how we all have these tendencies. And so we're going to talk about why. Like, where is that coming from? What is actually happening in somebody that actually creates this self importance at the end of the day? So, in case we haven't met, I am Karin Angelly. I'm one of the co hosts here.
And my name is Ashley. And I don't know if you looked up what it is, but that's like that self-importance is like the actual definition
Yep.
of it.
Yep. I have
I
looked it
looked,
up.
I looked
Like
it
I
up.
said before we got on the call, like somebody had said it in my presence recently, and I've really been contemplating it ever since that conversation because it's such a harsh word. And
Mhm.
so I wanted to know what was the actual definition of it, and I looked it up at that point too and was just like, this is such a big word that a lot of times we throw it around. And I think it's really important to understand, like I said, where is it coming from? How come it's showing up? Because we all have these self important tendencies that show up in some way, shape, or form in our lives. So,
Mhm. Yeah. And so it says, like, I just Googled it and it says a narcissistic personality disorder is a mental health condition in which people have an unreasonably high sense of their own importance.
hmm.
So that's interesting because I've never heard it described in that way.
Hmm.
But yeah. So they
Yeah.
seek to control everything and everyone around them.
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, like looking at myself, like this is the reason it felt like such a hard word when this person said it in my presence, because looking at myself, I have these tendencies, right? Like I think we all have these tendencies to look at ourselves with this self-importance. And
Mhm.
I think one of the biggest reasons for that narcissistic trait that we all can tend to show at one time or another is because we haven't really moved through some trauma, some emotion. We haven't actually taken the time to look at ourselves deeply and how come I am responding to somebody in a certain way. And then asking yourself, is this really how I want to show up? Is this how I
Yeah.
really want to show up in life? And so when you don't have that self awareness, when you're looking and pointing the finger at everybody else saying you need to be better, but you're not looking at yourself, that really, like that self awareness, that lack of self awareness really is what creates that narcissism, right? And like I said, we all have these tendencies. Like, I think when we step into mental health disorders, and I'm going to put air quotes on mental health disorders because I personally think that mental health disorders come as a result of suppressing something that we're not allowing to shine through for ourselves, right? Like maybe we feel this big self doubt, or I look at some people that are suppressing the desire of curiosity. Like I look at a lot of Christians can do this, okay? Like there's this, and I'm not saying that a Christian is a narcissist, that's not what I'm saying, but when you suppress the desire for curiosity of what other things might be out there, this creates a mental health disorder, in my opinion. Like I know that's really harsh, but I really do think, because I look at myself when I make
Mhm.
that observation, that's what I was doing. I didn't have that curiosity, and it created this sickness in me because I was like, but this is the only way. And when you really look at life, it's like there are so many possibilities, and when you stick yourself in that small possibility, you limit yourself. And then
Mhm.
you also say, I have that self-importance. I'm right, you're wrong. And that's
Yeah.
creating that narcissism that is like, ooh, hold on a second.
Well, and I looked up here, like, how can you tell if someone is narcissistic? And it says sense of self-importance, preoccupation with power, beauty, or success, entitled, can only be around people that are important or special,
Mm,
interpersonally explorative for their own gain,
mm,
arrogant, lack of empathy, and must be admired. And for me, it's like those to me all sound like signs of childhood trauma.
mm,
And the more we have that generational childhood trauma, the worse it gets. And that's what we were talking about too, is that like we have parents that are hurting, raising kids and hurting their kids. And then
mm,
that's where you have narcissistic parents and then children that have narcissistic traits. And if you don't heal that, it is affected. Like my parents had a very painful childhood. And my childhood was not painful in the way that theirs was, but it definitely left me with a lot of trauma. And I know for me, I had a very big preoccupation with success. And so, like going through school, I had to have the good grades. I got my worth from that. I know my mom put a lot of importance on the way I looked, and somehow I rebelled from that. But I also felt a lot of worth from that. Like I had people compliment me often, and I felt like that was something that I had to. And I think that's partially why I kind of rebelled from it too, was because I felt like I had to look good and I
mm,
had to be successful.
mm.
So I can see those things for me as well, like
Yeah,
where I went and was like, because of that trauma, I found my worth in other things.
yeah.
And so with narcissistic people that are truly narcissistic, because I read a book about co-parenting with a narcissist, because I do believe my children's bio mother is. And it was reading the book was like reading from my life. It was
Mhm.
unbelievable. Of like my life with her and the kids. And it says that they aren't capable of love at all, because they only think about themselves and they use their kids as something to live through versus love. And so they live vicariously through them and get their joy from them. And I can see that when parents don't know how to be loved and they do get their love from their kids, whether they're narcissists or not. Like I see a lot of people struggle with it. And even myself, like you want your kids to show you that love because it makes you feel good and you want that love from them. But there's a lot of people that will um create codependency with their children and create very unhealthy relationships with their children and enable their children because they want to feel loved. And that's what I see happening or attempting to happen with my kids and her is how she'll try to create these very unhealthy relationships with them to try to create love in her life. And you look at her past or her childhood, it was not filled with love, and so that's where you have a narcissist who can't love because they've never been loved, they've never experienced love. And so how can they love? So when I'm reading this co-parenting book about it's like how the kids be around them the least amount possible because they'll never feel love from that person. And um like show them love as much as you can in healthy ways, because that person isn't capable of it. But when you don't know how to love anyone around you and you always have to achieve or be arrogant or self-important to receive love, that's not real love. So there's no self-love and there's no love from other people, so you are incapable of loving, because it starts inside of you and within you.
Mhm.
And that's the really hard part. And talking about that too, just my my middle son, when he was I think he was 7, he said that her mother, that grandma, doesn't love them or love him.
Mm,
And I asked him why he would say that, and he said, well, she only cares about herself.
mm.
And so he even seen that self-importance in a grandma. And like that was really sad to hear, is this little child thinking his grandma doesn't love him, which
Mm,
is
yeah,
crazy. But
yeah.
that's how deep those um narcissistic, I'm hurting, so other people around me hurt, and I can't express love.
Hmm. And at the end of the day, I think that when we start having these tendencies, we're putting up a facade for the
Mhm.
world, right? Like there's this gap between who we are and who we're showing to the world.
Mhm.
And who we are when we have those narcissistic tendencies is, well, I'm the most important person in the room. I have to be with the most important people. I have to do the most important things, all the things. Like that's who we are, right? But this facade, like we're putting out this facade too, that we're continuing that, like we're
Yeah.
continuing to push that out. And it's just, it creates, especially in kids, can create confusion too, because it's like, well, they're looking at you as the model of who do I need to be? And if you're being this facade, they're going to continue to be that facade too.
Mhm.
That's honestly what probably one of the biggest reasons that I didn't want to have kids, because I'm like, man, there's so much stuff that you can accidentally imprint onto a child,
Oh,
not
100%.
even realizing it, because this is your trauma that you're dealing with, because I don't care who you are, you have some sort of trauma from
Mhm.
childhood. Even if you had a great childhood, I had a great childhood, but I still am like, ooh, I need to work through that. I didn't realize that that was creating some sort of subconscious pattern that was playing out over and over in my life. And a lot
Mhm.
of times, these things, actually, not a lot of times, all the time, these things get stuck in our body. Our body
Mhm.
now becomes the mind. And so our
Yeah.
body starts to feel certain ways. And because our body feels a certain way, it's telling our brain that this is how we need to think. And so we get stuck in this like thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking. And
Mhm.
until we actually start to look at that wide gap and that facade that we're putting out to the world, that like when we start doing that and looking at that, that's when that gap can kind of decrease and we can kind of be like, wait, that's not who I really am. I actually am that divinity, and I can actually become that divinity when I start looking at those patterns that I keep creating over and over and over again in my
Mhm.
life. And I never, like some people will out there will say, "Oh, a narcissist can never change, like they will always think about themselves, they'll always be self-important." I don't think that's true. I think that we have, all of us, the ability to
Mhm.
create change in our life. So, like that saying of once a narcissist, always a narcissist, or once a liar, always a liar. Like, I don't believe that, because I think that at any time we can look at ourselves and have this growing sense of self awareness and go, wait a minute, when I do these things, when I put out that facade that I'm the most important person in the world, that is like hurting other people. So I can start and create change in myself in order to change that tendency and change what I'm creating in my life. Because, like, one thing I've been noticing in my life recently is that, like, really pay attention to my thoughts, because I can see more than ever the patterns of the thoughts and what it creates. And so,
Mhm.
and like, it's gotten to the point where I'm like, oh my God, don't think that thought. That's not what I want to think. Ew. And that's exactly the response that I want to have, because
Yeah.
that's how you create change in yourself, where you're
Mhm.
like, wait, I don't want to think that, because I know if I continue to think that way,
Mhm.
that I will continue to create the same thing I've always created. Why would I want to create from the known when I can create from an unknown emotion? Like, instead of sitting in this narcissistic, I'm the most important person in the world, what if I changed the thought and the feeling, and I started going, wait, I don't want to think like that. I want to do something different.
Mhm.
That's when you step into the unknown and you start literally changing your entire life just by a thought alone, because your thought is going to create either an action from yourself or an action from the rest of the universe, right? Like you're calling in with all the thoughts that you have, with all the thoughts that you entertain. And if those thoughts and those feelings are coherent and they match up, you will create something. And
Mhm.
that's the reason that I'm like, oh, I don't want to, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to think like that, because I've seen more and more recently how each and every thought creates something. And
Mhm.
so I really try and pay attention to, what am I saying? How am I saying it? What am I feeling when I
Mhm.
say it? Like, that's the most important thing for me. Because if I'm
Yeah.
sitting here and if I'm just telling you the facts about a situation, I'm not necessarily reliving it. But if I'm feeling that situation over again, and it was maybe a situation that made me feel anger or frustration or whatever, I'm reliving it.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. And so for me, I would rather shut my mouth than
Mhm.
say the thing again, just so that I can make sure that I'm not reliving that experience over and over again. And so I was saying this to a friend recently. I'm like, I feel like there's less and less to say, if that makes sense, because a lot of times we have been programmed to say things in a negative stent because it's more interesting to other people around us. We are, unfortunately, the human race is definitely interested in drama, right? We feed off of drama, and drama at its core is a survival instinct, right? Like, it's creating that survival instinct. And so if I want to break that habit of the survival instinct in myself that creates narcissism, that creates anger, frustration, any of the lower level energies, I can't continue to talk about certain things that could get me into a certain feeling, right? Like, it's so amazing how your body works, that just through, so I was reading this the other day, actually it was yesterday. I was reading this. Oh no, I was on a call with Heart Math Institute, right? Like, this is really really cool what they were talking about. And the guy with Heart Math Institute was talking about how your heart always is informing your brain, right? So people used to think that it was your brain that was informing your body. No, it's actually your heart that informs your brain more than anything else. And the mere touch of another person can create that oxytocin to be released in your body. Your body is releasing a feel good hormone just by the touch of another human being. So
Mhm.
think about how subconscious that is. You're not
Mhm.
going, oh my God, I feel so good. This person is touching me. No, your body is actually going, oh, someone's touching me. That feels good. You're not even putting out a conscious thought. Your heart is putting that out. So, this is how deeply ingrained a lot of these subconscious patterns can become. And so
Mhm.
when you look at what you're thinking and you're feeling and your what you're saying to an intensity where you're like, wait, I really can't talk about that, because if somebody could just touch me and I could feel an emotion without having a conscious thought, I can't even say this. Like, I've got to be really careful about what are the words that are coming out of my mouth. And more than anything, I'm like, I got to really be paying attention. So that even
Yeah.
means if I'm sitting here labeling somebody else a narcissist, like, that's something that I've really been thinking about. If I'm sitting here labeling somebody else, there's a hurt in me because I'm sitting here feeling like I need to judge somebody and their actions. And so that's something for me that I have to look at and go, ooh, if I'm doing that, there's probably something in me that I need to really look at and really be very self aware of, because me labeling somebody else that, there's probably those tendencies in me as well. So I got to pay attention to what I'm doing.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. Well, I think sometimes it's like making sense of it. Like for
yeah.
me, it's like I have hurt, right? Like I have childhood trauma. And so you go back home and you're like, oh my gosh, and all of it comes to the surface. You're like, what is the cause of all of this? And it's like, okay, that makes sense. And for us trying to co-parent with someone, and it's like, oh, what on earth? Like, what would cause someone to do this to their children? And it's like, okay, this would be the only answer. This is the only thing that makes sense because you're trying to figure out how to communicate, how to work with them, how to help your kids. And so sometimes it's just really understanding the cause. And that's something that I've really liked as well. I've been going through like an inner work book. It's a book called Inner Work, and they talk about that. They talk about causes and triggers and where you're at and how to heal them and like kind of work through this ladder to go from like a really low place to a really high vibrational place. And I like that because it doesn't, it's not like, oh, this just is the way it is, that you're able to like really identify, recognize, and name and label things and then move forward. And I think that's too like how you had mentioned like why people are like, oh, once a narcissist, always a narcissist. It's because when you're at those very, very low levels, like it's really hard to move through those
Hmm.
because a lot of people that have narcissistic tendencies or are narcissists are because they are it's because they haven't had anyone show them another way.
Mm.
And so they're not around people that love themselves, not truly. They're around people that are self-important and arrogant and self-serving because that's the only way they got what they wanted in their life. And I know even with my relationship, like Derek was with what I classify as a narcissist with narcissistic parents. And so in the beginning stages of our relationship, there was many ways where he had those narcissistic traits where he was trying to protect himself within our relationship. And it was a fear mentality.
Hmm.
And so then you have that's the only way you know how to take care of yourself because you don't know how to love yourself.
Hmm.
So you're taking care of yourself through those self protections. And I know I've done that too in past relationships as well, and probably in this current one as well. And so um it's harder to change because you're at that lower vibrational frequency. It's like telling someone, okay, you can heal terminal cancer. You have 3 weeks to live
Yeah,
and you
you
can
can't
heal.
just yeah, you can't just jump straight to
No,
that in
it's
the
gonna
growth.
take a lot of
Yeah.
work. Like there's a lot of shit that got you there.
Hmm.
And so you're going to have to figure that out. Whereas someone with a little tiny skin piece of skin cancer, like if you tell them to heal that, they got a lot of time. Like there's probably not the same depth. It's not terminal. Like they're very, very different. But that's also what we chose. Like we chose who our parents are. We chose the life path before we came here, and we chose the amount of trauma that we were going to have to endure, um, and what kind of trauma. And then two different people that experience the same trauma respond to it in different ways. And I think that also has a lot to do with their circle of people who are around them too.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, oh, definitely. And I think that's something like we don't look at this enough. I know I don't look at this enough. That's really what I'm saying. Who am I surrounded with? And what, because we are very energetic beings, and the thoughts that somebody else is putting out
mhm,
they don't have to, but they can affect us.
mhm,
Even if it's not directed at us, like maybe somebody in the room is thinking, oh, that person is just a big idiot, right? Like that thought, we are such energetic beings that even if it's not directed towards us, we can still feel that.
mhm,
And it's so incredibly important to, in any situation you go into, really pay attention to the feelings and the effects that come up when somebody says something in your presence, or even just a thought, because that when they think that, it's like a lot of times, like, you know how you've had this conversation with somebody without having a conversation with somebody, you can look at them and just know what they're thinking.
mhm,
That is affecting you. Like that, what the thought is that they're thinking is still affecting you. if you allow it to. So, really focusing on who is in my presence, and is it okay that they are in my presence? And it
Yeah.
is so healthy, in my opinion, when somebody does have those narcissistic tendencies, really looking at boundaries for yourself. Like, look
Mhm.
at those boundaries and say, do I need to lessen the amount of time that I'm with this person? Do I need to just completely cut this person off? I'm not big on cutting people off. Like, I feel like that kind of thing happens naturally if it's supposed to.
Mhm.
But like, I know that like having a boundary with somebody that is showing those self-important tendencies can be really healthy. Like, and it's not it's so hard to say this in a non-judgmental way. I'm trying to say this as best I
Mhm.
can, but I don't feel like English really helps you with that. It's okay to look at an energy and go, it just doesn't align with me, and I'm okay with that. It's
Yeah.
not in a negative, positive, good, bad way. It's more that this isn't in alignment with where I know that I'm going. And if
Mhm.
I continue to put myself in a non aligning situation, it will affect where I'm going. It will affect my energies. And so, really, at the end of the day, it is about like looking at you and having this self-awareness of, that's not the energy I want to continue in. That's not how I want to continue to feel. And it's
Mhm.
not that it's okay. Like, this is what I want to say. Like, it's okay that that other person wants to feel that way. I don't judge you. I don't like, if that's what you want to create in your life, have at it. I am happy for you, but I know that that's not where I want to surround myself. And so I need to really look at boundaries for myself in a
Mhm.
loving way towards you, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Where it's like, I'm not judging you. I'm happy that that's what you want to create in your life. I just know that's not what I want to create in my life. And so I've got to create a hard no, let's stop this. I need to go a different direction. And that's a beautiful thing when we can do that with love.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where a lot of those natural divides happen because when you don't do something, that someone else does.
Yeah.
It's like the whole peer pressure thing.
Yeah.
Like they want you to do it because that validates them, that makes them feel good and all that.
Yeah.
And so when you're not, then that creates a natural divide because people are very insecure and they feel judged or they feel like you think you're better than them or whatever it is. But yeah, no, I completely agree. And I'm definitely more quick to just cut, oops, instead of allowing that natural divide to happen because I'm very sensitive to energies. Like I am the empath in quotations, and I can't stay regulated around that really negative disorganized energy. It throws me so hard and it triggers me with the type of inner childhood traumas I have and it doesn't work for me. And I'm one of those people that is the more the merrier. I'm a very strong extrovert. I want as many people around me as possible. But as soon as it comes to that like hostility and
Mm.
that kind of stuff, I'm just like, nope, I can't do it. Or just like this lack of I'm gonna have your back because you have my back.
Mm.
And it's something that's kind of interesting because I moved to Kelowna, and Kelowna is kind of known as the like hoity-toity kind of like the Orange County of Canada in some regards. And I'd have a lot of people say like, oh yeah, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of cliques and everything like that. And I was coming in to my kids' life, like they were in kindergarten, grade one. So they'd already kind of laid the groundwork with their biological parents. I'm coming in as a step parent. Step parents already, if a step parent does something wrong, it's like awful. And
Mm.
if a parent does something wrong, everything is hard as a parent. You know, it's like,
Mm.
oh, you're trying your best, mom. But if a
Right.
stepmom does something wrong, it's like, oh boy, like who do you think you are trying to even be a parent kind of
Mm.
thing. And so I was very nervous walking into what I thought was a very that atmosphere. And I could not believe the amount of people that had my back, that supported me, that encouraged me, all of it. And I believe that I've experienced that more than I have in any other place in my life. And it's because that was the energy that I was giving out.
Hmm.
Like I was showing up to volunteer, I was showing up to be there for my kids. And so I had everyone's back, so everyone had my back kind of
Hmm.
thing. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's kind of like what you were saying when you expect those things and you talk about those things, you have them come back to you.
Hmm.
But when you change that programming, you experience something completely different.
Yeah, yeah. And I can't stress enough how much life is really a reflection of us.
Hmm.
We don't see life as it is, we see life as we are.
Yeah.
So if you are looking at your life and you're going, and this is something I ask myself daily, if you're
Hmm.
looking at your life and you're feeling a certain way, your life will reflect that back to you. Period. End
Yeah.
of story. That's the reason that I'm like, you gotta be so careful. What are the words you say? What are the thoughts you think? What are you feeling? The feeling is the biggest thing, really, at the end of the day. What's the feeling you're putting out there? And is it aligned with the thought that you're thinking? Because if it is, you are literally going to be reflecting
Hmm.
something back to you that you may or may not like. Like that's the thing. Like if I look at my life and I'm like, "Ooh, I don't really like that." That just
Yeah.
means that I have some more time to work on me. And that's
Yeah.
okay. That's a great thing. Like I created this for myself so that I can work through that. So that
Hmm.
I can actually take a deeper look. And so that I can actually look at the programs that I've created in my body and go, how might I release that? Instead of continuing this cycle that I'm on, whether I'm feeling like, I don't know, anger, frustration, hate, whatever, I can choose. Listen, I don't want to keep in this energy. So what are the things that I need to do to, when I see it happen, stop it? When I
Yeah.
see it going on, how do I stop that? This is how you stop those narcissistic tendencies that we all have, right? You
Hmm.
see the thing that you don't want to continue to feel, and you go, what do I need to do to stop it? So, an
Yeah.
example of this happened. I was at the hospital last week, and I don't remember what came into my head, but I had this thought that I was like, "Ew, I don't like that." And I
Hmm.
went, "What do I need to do right now to prevent that thought from taking hold as a feeling in my body?" Because my body is used to a certain feeling that that thought is creating, right? Like my body's used to it. So what do I need to do?
Hmm.
So I remember sitting there going, "Oh my God, I'm so grateful for XYZ. I'm so like, I love this." And by the time I was done, like going through all the things, thinking about all the gratitudes that I had, I was so elated that I was like, I gotta text my friend and tell her how amazing my life is right now because I literally had created this cycle of, oh, I love my life. And remember that you created a cycle in your body for negative feelings. You can also create a cycle in your body for positive, where you're like, oh my God, I love my life. Things feel so amazing. So it's a lot easier for me because I've practiced this so much to flip faster because
Yeah.
I've been on this cycle of, oh, I love my life. Oh, and I can actually feel that I love my life. So it's a
Hmm.
lot easier for me to snap into a feeling of, oh, I love my life than if I hadn't been doing this for so
Hmm.
long, right?
Yeah.
Like, so just with anything, you can get really good at practicing anger, or you can get really good at practicing love.
Yeah.
It's literally a practice that gets stuck in your body. Does your body want to feed off of love or does it want to feed off of anger? And you'll
Yeah.
know by how you're feeling on a moment to moment basis.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I can't agree more. And that's where all of it feeds. like going back to being a narcissist. You're so used to feeling hurt and afraid and angry that you feed that, and that's where there's no coming back
Mm-hmm.
because you don't change that around.
Yeah, yeah. And that's how we hurt other people in our vicinity. And we continue that pattern until we go, I'm done. I've had
Yeah,
enough. I don't
yeah,
want to keep doing this anymore. What do I need to do? I
yeah,
think I've said this on this podcast before, but this just hits me so hard whenever I watch this testimonial of this girl that completely changed her suicidal tendencies. She wanted to kill herself. And she noticed every time she had that thought, she was like, I need to extract myself completely from this situation. So she would go to her room and she would start looking at pictures of a happy time in her life until, and she did it until she felt those elevated emotions, those feelings of feeling good. So she
mhm,
said, I'm feeling this way. If I continue to feel this way, it's going to create that suicide that I don't want to do. So I'm done with that.
yeah,
And let me tell you, this is not an easy process. I know
yeah,
anybody that's been in this process that is in any kind of tendencies like this is not an easy thing to break. But when you go, I'm done, what do I need to do?
yeah,
She literally went, I'm going to go to my room. I don't care what I'm doing right now. And I am going to feel elevated feelings,
mm,
regardless of how long it takes. She
yeah,
said some days it would take 10 minutes, some days it would take hours. She
mhm,
didn't care. But this is
yeah,
how she rewired and created change. And like you said, this is exactly how you create change from those narcissistic tendencies that we all tend to show at one point or another.
for
So,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we did pretty good with this one. Like this is hard hitting stuff, guys. I totally get it because anytime I say something, I'm actually looking at myself. I'm actually going, "Ooh, I've done this before." Like all these things, I am not excluded from. I
Mhm,
have at one time or another in my life, even maybe in this conversation, had these tendencies, right? So I'm looking at myself too, just like anybody else is. But with that, we are going to call this one a wrap. So, friends, if you are watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe and give us a like and leave a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast host, then go ahead and give us a 5-star. And once again, leave us a comment, ask your questions. Let us know your thoughts. But with that, we are going to call TMI Advice You Didn't Want a wrap for today. We will see everyone next time. Thanks so much for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue hanging out with us and don't forget to subscribe.